Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Biohazard Archives. I'm Nathan. In the previous episode of our timeline series, we traced the origins of Resident Evil and explained the earliest abnormal source discovery by humanity, the direct origin of the T virus. If you watched the last episode, this one will be series to follow. If not, that's fine as well. Let's continue the story. This episode is not about a virus, but about something just as important, as even more terrifying, the Plaga parasite. If the T virus represents biological collapse, then Plaga represents an earlier and different path, the systematic control of human beings.
Sattler Todopoderoso.
In the history of Resident Evil, things remain relatively calm as we reach the 15th century. In the remote mountains of Spain, in a place known as the Valley of Wolves, a terrifying seed quietly begins to grow. The Saddler family founded a cult known as Los Illuminados in the Valley of Wolves. Every generation of this family shared the same ambition, to rule the world. At first, their goal was simply to gain complete control over the fertile villages nearby. Almost every year during the Harvest Festival, members of the cult would preach to the villagers, but the local lived comfortably and paid little attention to these beliefs. That changed when one of the cult leaders, by chance, discovered the Plaga parasite rising from deep underground. This leader called himself the Teacher. Under the banner of purifying the blood, he implanted the parasite into the villagers. Using a dominant Plaga attached to his staff, he could directly control their minds. From that moment on, Plaga was no longer just a living organism. It became a tool, a form of ruler combining faith, ritual, and biological control. Those infected by Plaga were called ganados, a Spanish word meaning livestock. The term was deeply insulting, yet not inaccurate. Plaga did not kill its host immediately. Instead, it took control of the nervous system, allowing people to walk, speak, and walk while slowly losing their own will. They retained the shell of daily life, but no longer truly belonged to themselves. At the same time, they became increasingly violent. As more villagers lost control and violence spread, the regional lord of the Valley of Wolves, Gregorio Salazar, ordered a full investigation. The results were shocking. The true cause was a spider-like parasite. Gregorio then led his armored troops to purge the infected and destroy the parasite throughout the castle and the village. At the time, this appeared to be a victory. As a reward, Gregorio was granted the title of Count by the king and given a special mission to become the one who seals away the demons, a duty passed down through generations. However, this was not a complete victory. It was only the first round of conflict. The true confrontation with the cult began during the rule of the second sealing count, Iblito Salazar. Under the influence of the cult's dominant Plaga, large numbers of mature parasites emerged from underground near the castle and attacked various animals. This time, the scale of infection was far greater, both in number and in species. The Salazar family paid a heavy price to eliminate the infected creatures and fill in the collapsed ground, eventually driving the Saddler family to a nearby island. But Ippolito himself was gravely wounded in battle and later died from his injuries. After the sudden death of the previous count, the third count, Gregorio Jr., grew increasingly paranoid about the parasites. In addition to strengthening the seals, he expanded the castle and constructed massive defense and complex mechanisms. Believing that Plaga came from underground and that water symbolized purity, he built an extensive waterway system beneath the castle. This system provided fresh water, drainage, and storage for times of drought. For its era, it was an extraordinary engineering achievement. However, these projects nearly exhausted the Salazar family's accumulated wealth. It was not until the fourth count, Raymond Salazar, took power that the family's glory was restored. In practice, this defensive system proved effective. Without access to underground colonies, the cult could only study the few remaining samples on their island, and no longer dared to expand. Through the efforts of several generations, Plaga was successfully sealed away. But this balance was not an ending. It was only a long period of stagnation. Centuries later, Plaga returned and completely took control of Valley of Wolves. This is the situation Leon faced in Resident Evil 4. At this point, the history of Plaga is complete. It rose from underground, was used by religion, sealed by nobility, and lost control again centuries later. But if we look back on this entire history, was the parasite really the most important element? In the next episode, we will continue with another origin substance that stands alongside the T-virus and the Plaga, the mold. You have already seen it in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8. Many people believe it is a new concept. But what if, in the timeline, it is even older than Plaga and older than the T-virus? If you don't want to miss the full Resident Evil timeline series, feel free to subscribe to Biohazard Archives. We will continue the story in the next episode.